Okay, let's take a look at some relighting techniques. Before we jump into Nuke, we're going to need our camera data. So I'm going to jump into File, Open, and then jump into Utility Passes version 1 Start. Open that file up, and we're going to export our camera from here. So if I do View, select the camera, I do File, Export Selection, and go to my Export Selection dialog box. What we're going to want to do is do FBX export. But before we do that, let's just make sure we reset our settings so we have a fresh start, and then we'll go down to FBX export. If you don't have this in your list here, FBX export, jump into Settings, Windows Settings, Plugin Manager, and then if you scroll all the way down, you'll have this FBX Maya, and you'll just want to make sure that's loaded, and that'll give you access to that. So before we do an export, we're going to edit this preset. We're going to just go to Autodesk Media and Entertainment preset to reset everything, and then all we got to do is go to our advanced options, FBX file format, and then change our version down to 2009. That'll just make sure that whatever package we're going to, if it has an FBX version 2009 or later, this camera is going to be compatible with that. So I'm just going to close that out, export selection. I dropped this in miscellaneous, utility passes camera version 1. I'm not going to export it since I already have it exported. And then we'll just do cancel. And then if I jump over to Nuke, what we can do is just go to File, Open, Project Root, Nuke, and then we'll jump into Chapter 9, Relighting, Start. So first thing we're going to want to do is set our project settings. So I'm going to jump into my project settings right here, copy and paste that, and just make our project root directory, our project directory path. And now we can bring in that camera. So before we do that, I'm just going to come down here to our set knob defaults and make sure we're setting our knob defaults. And then if I drop in a camera node, so tab camera, just like that. What we can do is go from the camera tab over to the file tab and do read from file. And if I go into my file dialog and select that camera we just exported, it's going to ask us if we want to delete the current camera, bring in a new one. We're going to hit yes. And then if we just hit 1, we'll get that camera right there. So the way Nuke's built-in relighting system works is it utilizes the point position pass, the normals pass, and our camera pass to kind of do this 2.5D relighting setup. And to set that up, what we're going to do is drop in a relight node. The color is going to be our utilities pass right there. Lights is going to be whatever lights we want to do. So if we go over to our 3D options, lights, we have a whole list of lights right here. So if we just drop in a normal light right there, just like that. And then I'm going to drop in a scene node, and the scene node is essentially a 3D merge node. So if we do multiple lights, we just merge them in here just like this, just like that. For now, I'm just going to stick with 1, and then we're going to plug that in. And the next input is our camera, so I'm going to plug in our camera right there. The next input after that is our material, so our shader. So if we go to our 3D options, we'll go to shader, and then we have a whole list of shaders that we can utilize here. I'm just going to stick with diffuse for now, right there. Plug that in. And then if we view our relight node, nothing's happening yet, but if we choose our normal vectors and our point position, so our normal vectors is going to be point position, or excuse me, normals world will be our normals vector, and then point positions will be our point position worlds, just like that. You notice we're starting to get some shading, and if we come in here and start moving the slider on, I'm just hitting tab to get over to that 3D scene. You notice we start to get some shape. So now it's got some 2.5D relighting stuff going. So it's not actually utilizing any 3D data, but it's pretty accurate as far as like where our lights are actually positioned. So if we actually go behind the scene, it'll actually start doing some relighting and so on and so forth. So this is a bit hard to see, right? It's not very readable. We don't really know where our geometry is at in our scene. So what we can do is utilize that position to points setup to visualize our 3D setup before actually tabbing back over to see what's going on with our lighting setup. So I'm going to drop in a position to points and then plug that into our main setup. I'm going to choose surface point being point position world, our surface normal being our normal's world pass right there, just like that. Now what I'm going to do is just drop in a scene node, and this will just be kind of like our visualization node. So if I drop in my scene and plug in point position, position to points, we'll drop in our lights and we'll drop in our camera. We'll kind of get a better visual representation of what's going on in our scene. And now if we double click our light, we can come in here and move that around and actually see what's going on a lot easier, just like that. So we can set our light fall off to be quadratic, which will give us at least somewhat physically accurate fall off going. And if we play with our intensity, you'll see that the light will get hotter. So I'm going to bump this up to something like 100, just like that, and you'll see that we're getting that fall off happening there. And now if we jump back over to our relight, you notice that it's looking much, much nicer. So with this relight node, essentially what we want to do is we kind of want to build out a raw lighting pass, right? And that way we can actually combine it with our passes. So to do that, currently our diffuse shader is set to be a gray value, and what we're going to do is bump that up to 1 to be white, so it'll be perfectly raw. It won't have actually any texture information in it. So from there, what we can do is add in some shadows. So right now it looks very gamey, right? It doesn't actually have any shadows, and we're never going to be able to get any real shadows coming from this setup because this is all just a 2.5D setup. There's no actual real 3D geometry within here. But what we can utilize is our AO pass to kind of get us at least some kind of contact shadows happening. So if I drop in a shuffle node and go down to ambient occlusion, just like that, what we can do is hit M for merge and merge that into our scene, just like that. And we'll just set that to multiply, just like that. And now we're actually getting some kind of shadowing happening there, which is nice. So right now we have the equivalent to a lighting pass, but we don't have any GI going, right? We have a raw lighting, which is this, but currently there's nothing happening in the shadows. We need some global illumination, right? Well, we can actually use this AO pass to do a cheap AO or a cheap GI as well. So if I drop in a merge and plug this in and do an additive operation with our lighting result and our ambient occlusion, and then if we just drop in a gray node for the AO, we can tone this way back, something like that. Now if we view our plus, we're getting some ambient lighting happening here, just like that. So we have the equivalent to a raw lighting pass setup, and we could come in here and insert our preset for our Beauty Rebuild hybrid. But just to keep this first example simple, we'll get into this kind of stuff in the next example. But what I'm going to do is just drop in a dot by hitting period, hook that up, and then drop in another merge to multiply this together. So I'm merging, and then the operation is multiply. So now what we're doing is we're just adding some shadows in, just like that. So we're keeping all that ray trace information in there, and then we're just adding a little bit of shape, just like this. So that's the point cloud relighting setup. I'm going to show you guys a different way to do this. If I drop in a normals and camera space, a lot of times in production you will see this kind of used in a lot of hacky ways. You know, with multi-pass compositing, you can get pretty hacky and you can get some pretty awesome results. So with this example, I'm not going to use this relighting node, and I'm just going to use some grades and stuff to kind of shuffle this information around just to give us some extra information into our scene. So for this example, what I'm going to do is take the red channel, just like that. And then what I'm going to do is copy and paste that and take our Y information just like that. And if I multiply these together, just like that, so merge with M and then multiply for the operation, we're getting some isolation here, which is nice. But say we want to do something like a rim light. Something that's really good for that is utilizing our facing ratio pass. So I'm going to drop in a shuffle and then merge in our facing ratio, just like that. And then I'm going to copy and paste that multiply and multiply in our facing ratio, just like that. And you can see we're starting to get some shape happening. But if I drop in a grade node, so I hit G after my facing ratio and enable my multiply again, if I slam the gamma down like that, you'll see that we're now starting to get that nice edge highlight there. And if I multiply up a step like that, you'll see we're really starting to get some nice results there. So this would be like a rim lighting pass, just like that. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did on here and just multiply that into our scene. Just like that. And you'll notice we're getting this very strange look, right? We're looking at this, and when we multiply this, we get this really weird stuff happening right here, like that. And that's happening because we currently have information, if you look right here, going below 1. So instead of stopping the multiplication at 0, it's actually going below 0 and multiplying within those negative values. So what we want to do is fix that. So it's actually happening up here with our normals camera. So if you notice that this data is going from +1 to a -1, and when we multiply those together, it's the values are still going below 1. So if we just throw in a clamp node after that, we notice we no longer get those values. And if we multiply that in our scene, so that's before and after the clamp. And then if I drop in another merge and merge our lighting from over here and our new rim light that we're creating here, and what we're going to do is plus those together, just like that. But before we move forward, we want to make sure that we're multiplying all the way up so that this actually does fall into black. If we leave that down like that, what we're going to end up doing is adding in another part of the scene. And what we really just want from this pass is just this edge highlight right there. So we want to make sure that we bring that multiplication all the way up on that. And then when we merge it into our scene using the added operation, we get this really nice rim light right there. And then if we want to play with that exposure some more, all we have to do is drop in another grade node after this multiplication and go up a couple steps, just like that. And that'll bring that rim line up, just like that. So we looked at some lighting and GI tricks, and then this next example, what we're going to do is take a look at how to do some reflection tricks. So I got some HDRs laid out here for us, and we're going to utilize these to replace our current reflections that are within our scene. So I'm going to bring in our beauty rebuild. So insert comp nodes, beauty rebuild hybrid. And then what we're going to do is completely remove our current reflections and current specular. So I'm just going to disable those. And then I'm just going to give us some space down here to work. So I'm going to bring these HDRs down here. And what we're going to do is shuffle out our normals camera pass. So normals camera right there. And then what we're going to do is essentially ST map this with our HDRs. But before we can do that, we need to set up our values correctly. So right now, we're working from a 1 to -1 range. And if we drop in a grade node, and we remap our block point to -1, we'll lift all those negative values up to be positive. So if we turn off our LUT, you'll see everything has been normalized. So now if we drop in our ST map, plug in our normals to our ST map and plug in our source to one of our HDRIs, and then our UV channels will be RGB, you'll see that we get this HDRI mapped on. And if we come over here and rotate this between our HDRIs, you can see we're getting some pretty awesome results. It's definitely not physically accurate by any means, but it's a nice cheap trick. And you can see if I drop in a transform node here and go up and down, it's actually giving us some pretty decent results by warping the image like that. Going to get rid of that transform and just take this result and add it on top of our image, just like we were doing up here with these reflections. So merge and then set the operation to additive. So we'll use the plus operation. You can see it's currently going over our entire image. So what we want to do is just grab these teapots here and we'll replace those reflections alone. So if I drop in a shuffle and I grab our RGB matte teapots, we have our RGB. And then if I do an expression node, let's change our channels to RGBA and then set the expression to R plus green plus blue. We'll get a matte for all of them. And then what we can do is drop in another merge and hook that up to that matte, and we'll set that operation over to mask. We'll essentially mask all that out. And then what we can do is if we come over here, we're noticing that we're getting some really bad contact shadows. We want to actually darken that, and we can utilize the AO pass for that as well. So if I drop in a shuffle node and bring out our ambient occlusion, and what I'm going to do is merge that over top of our masked out reflection, and then we'll set that operation over to multiply, just like that, and that'll darken those contact shadows. If I check what results we're getting now, you can see it's much better. And if I drop in a grade node here, and if I slam that gamma down, we can notice we can really get rid of those reflections down there. So now if we just check out what we're getting, if we go all the way down to our pre-malt, we can start doing stuff like this, just swap out our reflections and kind of experiment, get some different results. If we want to mimic some specular highlights, if we come in here and just blur our HDRI like this, you can see it's kind of mimicking kind of like a reflection glossiness within V-Ray material, which is really nice. And if I come over here, we can get back to a similar result. So this was the studio lighting setup that the render was originally rendered with. So we're getting back to where we were, sort of. It's definitely a fake. But now we can start doing stuff like if we drop in a grade node and we want to start boosting this area up. If we hit O for our roto, plug in the mask, and we drop in our B-spline and just rotate that around just like that, we can essentially just bring that up a couple stops just like that. And then if we blur our roto node, so I'll hit B for blur and then boost that up just like that. And we come back to our add operation, we can see that we're boosting up that highlight now. So that's before and after, just like that. Now if we want to start doing stuff like tinting this, that's all very easy to do. Cool. So this next example just demonstrates how we can just simply use the normals pass to relight our image. So in this example, instead of just multiplying over top of our beauty pass, what I'm going to do is actually insert it into our raw lighting pass. So I'm going to insert our beauty rebuild. So file, insert comp nodes, go to our presets, beauty rebuild hybrid, then bring that tree down. Essentially what we're going to do is we're going to work between our diffuse and our raw light, and we're going to do some work in there. So I'm just going to move this tree down just like that to give us some room. And then if I just drop in our normals camera pass, so shuffle underscore normals camera is the password we're going to use. We're going to use this technique called rotating normals. So if I hit this shuffle node and file insert comp nodes, I have another preset set up for us. So presets, rotate normals. And essentially what this gizmo does is rotates our normals. So if we scroll up and down in a Z, you'll see exactly what it's doing. It's just simply rotating our normals like that. And we can use this to kind of relight our image. So what I'm going to do is just take one channel. We'll just take our red channel, do shuffle, then shuffle red into all of our channels. And then what we can do is continue to play with this rotation So we'll give it the key light, something like that. So you'll notice it's getting pretty crunchy. It's because our image currently isn't normalized. We currently got values going below 0. So what I mean by normalizing essentially is remapping any kind of float values beyond the 0, 1 range that we can see on our monitors and remap them to a value that fits between 0 and 1. So if I drop in a grade node and do block point equals -1, we'll remap that image. So now when we rotate our normals, it looks much more as expected. So if I drop in another grade node, we can kind of bring the gamma down a little bit to make it a little bit more crunchy. And then we can do our same techniques that we've been doing and just add some contact shadows in with our ambient occlusion pass. So I'll drop in a shuffle node. AO. And then I'll merge and change the operation to multiply to get those contact shadows in there. And then essentially what we can do is dissolve that into our lighting tree. So we go from 0 to 1, just like that. So essentially we're mixing between the two. And now we have them mask. So if we just want to mix in, say, everything but the background, so we'll take all this information, but we'll leave the background how it is, so we can get our nice shadows and everything that's currently within our render. If I shuffle out our RGB matte for our background, so RGB matte underscore background, and then we'll use our green channel, just like that, and then we'll set that to mask. Now you notice when I go up, we're just replacing the set, but if I switch between those, so now if we play with this dissolve, you notice that we're mixing that in. So now we're taking the relight for our foreground objects, but we're keeping our background lighting for our shadows. And then if we just go all the way down to the bottom of our tree, you can see there's our beauty rebuild. And everything got pretty dark, but if we drop in a grade node to boost up that exposure, something like that, we'll get back to where we were before. And then if we can just continue to rotate our normals, you'll see we have a lot of control. So that was a lot of different techniques for relighting. You can absolutely mix and match a lot of this stuff. Say you want to use your point cloud, but actually come in here and do it to your raw lighting pass. That's absolutely an option. You can add in reflections. You can mix and match a lot of this stuff. So now we're going to start talking about depth of field and motion blur and how to achieve really effective results within Nuke.